I call the Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, it's great to be participating in this budget debate and to be part of a government that is getting on and addressing the issues that are important for New Zealanders, and it's even more of a special privilege to be following Mr Grant Robertson. I've got a simple challenge from Mr Robertson. Tell me a single economic statistic that today is not better than when we became to government. Let's go through the list. How about we take an interruption?
A point of order, Grant Robertson.
I'd like to respond to Dr Smith's question. We can start with debt, unemployment.
No, be seated.
Mr Speaker.
Can't do that.
Mr Speaker, let's look at inflation. Lowest figures, Mr Speaker, 0.1% in over 17 years. Let's look at job growth. A budget of 150,000 new jobs over the next 3 years. Unemployment coming down from 5.8% down to 4.5% over the budget period. Let's look at interest rates. When we came to government, they were 11%. Today, they're about 5.5%, and that matters for businesses that are creating jobs, and, Mr Speaker, that matters to New Zealanders wanting to own their own home. Mr Speaker, a budget is about making choices, and this government is making choices to back children that are in hardship, and we say that is the right response for New Zealand at this time. This is a budget that puts more money into important services like health and education, ensuring that whether it be cancer treatment, whether it be improving educational standards in early childhood centre in our schools and in our tertiary institutions. Mr Speaker, I was appalled to hear Mr Grant Robertson say there's nothing in this budget for the regions. Well, let's do a test. For most of us that represent regions, and there's a good number of members in the House, we know that irrigation offers opportunities for areas like my colleague, the MP for Kaikoura in Huranui, for my area on the Waimea Plains. And what has the Labour Party said about irrigation? Every step of the way, they have opposed government providing support for rural communities to grow their irrigation, and they've opposed the reforms to the RMA that will enable those irrigation schemes to come on stream. And wasn't it interesting listening to the Mayor of Westport, if there was ever a region that was in difficulty? And what did the Mayor of Westport say was the most important thing for his community in Bulla? It was increased communications, broadband and cell phone services, which we provided for in this budget, and members opposite had the tenacity to vote against the bill that will enable us to deliver for a community that's having a difficult time. Mr Speaker, the part that I just find so shallow about opposition contributions to this budget is they complain there's not enough money for this, that and everything. They oppose any steps in the budget to generate additional revenue, and then they whinge about the surplus. They obviously didn't get to year one mathematics and how a budget makes up those choices. And Mr Speaker, and then we had the clangers from Andrew Little. The big priority for Labour, the issue that's going to make the difference, gender reassignment surgery. Now, I don't know about my colleagues on this side of the House. All the time we get bailed into court. What's the government doing about gender reassignment surgery? That's the #1 priority for members opposite, and they wonder why they are in the polls. But, Mr Speaker, the clangor, the real clangor for Labour came the day after the budget. They will look back on the career of Mr Little and identify his post-budget speech as the beginning of the end for his period as leader. With just a few words, Mr Speaker, he has undermined the security of 600,000 retirees in our country. Let me quote just what he said. I cannot commit to New Zealand superannuation being universal. Word for word what he said. Does Jacinda Ardern agree with Mr Little's statement? Does Annette King agree with their leader's statement? Mr Speaker, as the Prime Minister said, there's only 3 options for Labor in respect of their statements about superannuation. Are they going to raise the age? Are they going to means test? Or are they going to reduce the level of the entitlement? And I challenge the next member from Labor on their feet to give back to New Zealanders some idea, those superannuitants, of what their entitlements are if we're ever to have a Labor government. I had a call from my electorate chairman at the weekend. He said with Mr Little's comments on superannuation, he was feeling more optimistic about National's prospects of winning a 4th term than ever. And Mr Speaker, let me come to the issue of good fiscal management. Because, Mr Speaker, let me give the numbers. 5 budgets ago, there was a deficit of $18 billion. The budget after, Bill got it down to 9. The budget after, down to 5. The one after, down to 3. And the latest estimates for this year, Mr Speaker, is a deficit of only $0.6 billion, or 1.3% of government expenditure. Now, members opposite, last week I tried to table in the Parliament the official figures from the Parliamentary Library on the record of different governments as compared with their budgets, as compared with the actual results. I'm not surprised that the Labor Party objected to me tabling the document. So let me explain to what the House it says. How accurate was the previous Labor government in their predictions of surpluses and deficits? Well, the numbers are, over their 9 budgets, they were on average out by 4%. Well, Mr English was out by 1.4%. If we take the very last budget, the last Labor budget, they stood on their feet and promised a surplus, Mr Speaker, of $1.3 billion. Do you know what we actually got? We got a deficit of $3.9 billion. They were out by $5 billion. How dare they get to their feet and criticise Bill English, our Minister of Finance, for being out by only 1%. They know in their hearts that this is a good outcome. And Mr Speaker, let's talk about some of the initiatives and the way in which they benefit my own home community in Nelson. Mr Speaker, this budget means $4 million more going into the families of the lowest incomes in my Nelson constituency. There are 1,300 people on benefits in Nelson who are going to benefit by $25 per week. Mr Speaker, there are another 2,200 families on low incomes in my electorate who are going to benefit by $25 per week. Mr Speaker, there are 6,000 children in the lowest income families in my electorate who are going to benefit from this budget. And the member says when? I say to the member, it is 43 years since a government increased the base level of benefits, and I'm proud to be part of a national government that has delivered it and delivered onside it, increasing requirements for work. And Mr Speaker, alongside that, this budget provides for 150,000 additional jobs over coming years. Mr Speaker, there's been comments about levies.
Order, take a breath.
Well, let me give me an example of one. Mr Speaker, this budget provides for a $200 per car reduction in ACC levies. A $200 reduction in ACC levies? Well, that's a good question. Mr Mallard asked who puts them up. I'll tell you who. In July of 2008, the Labor government put the ACC levy on cars up by $50, and we're a government that's reducing them by $200 per car, and that will be welcome relief, Mr Speaker, for the 2.4 million car owners across our country. Mr Speaker, I could talk of the very constructive measures in this budget to improve New Zealand's management of water, the measures in this budget to improve our management of the RMA. I could talk at length about so many initiatives in this budget that provide for the issues that matter to New Zealand, and that is why members on this side of the House have been so strongly supporting the best budget I've seen in my 25-year career.
Before I call the next member, can I just encourage members to take a breath? It is going to be a long debate. It will be robust, no doubt. It's a lot easier if people just, make them rare and reasonable and hopefully witty, as their previous speaker indicated should be the case. I call Dr. Russell Norman.